Did you ever snoop through your parents' things as a child and absolutely regret what you found to this day? What was it and did they ever find out? NSFW. My parents had this box of unlabeled VHS tapes all with blank white sleeves in their closet. Finally home alone one day and sneak one into the VCR and what title pops up? V-Town. Edit. 2 years on Reddit and this is my first gold ore. Found a letter about a kid my mum gave up for adoption when she was 18. Weird to think my mum had a whole different life before I came along when she was 27. My dad's journal from before I was born. He was so incredibly depressed. He talked about how my older sister cried on her way to kindergarten and it was the first time he'd been able to relate to her in years. Totally broke my heart. I've never told him though. That was definitely not meant for me to read. Found some old nudes of my mom when I was like 11. I didn't realize it was her at first. Man, I have never lost a boner faster. I found my letters to Santa hidden in my parents' socks. After my dad passed away, I searched through the browser history on his computer. Tons of porn and websites for ordering black market Viagra. I didn't personally regret finding it, but I know my mom would have. So I deleted the history and never told her. When I was a kid I looked through my parents' closet while they weren't there and found anal beads. I didn't know what they were but they were squishy so I put them in my mouth and chewed them. After my dad passed away I found some letters sent to him from his family that dated 40 years ago requesting him to marry his distant cousin so they can keep the family blood pure. He was 32 and she was 11. Side note, Middle Easterns have this weird thing with marrying underage girls who also are your distant close cousins. I found other letters from his relatives saying that they are cutting ties from him because he refused to marry, and that he is no longer welcomed in the country. They had the power to blacklist him. My dad ran away shortly after the first letter that I mentioned and met my mom who's Bulgarian, who's also 2 years younger than him, and got married. Honestly I'm just proud of him. Unfortunately, yes, my dad's father was a fighter pilot during World War II. Immediately after the war, he was still flying for the Air Force when he crashed his plane into a mountain and died on his way home from a training mission. My dad had a bunch of artifacts from the wreckage. Small things that they could bring off the mountain. It took 2 weeks of searching to find the wreckage, and 5 days of hiking up the mountain to get there, which he got after his mom passed away. I was 14. A couple of years later, I wanted to show the artifacts to a friend. Went in my dad's closet to find them, but what I found instead was a 12-inch long, thick, black dildo. I immediately closed the bag it was in, and never went looking for the artifacts again. However, a few years later, I was about 20 and dating this guy. My parents were out of town for the weekend, so he was staying over at my house. He thought of himself as a musician and asked if we could record him singing and playing guitar. So, I got out the video recorder and, not wanting to record over anything important, I played the tape that was in it to be sure. It was a Homemaker 6 tape my parents made. I about died. Thankfully I didn't actually see them doing it, because it was right at the beginning, still fully clothed, making out on their bed. I noped out of that real quick. Never did record him singing, which is fine cause he sucked. The Joy of 6 book, illustrated. Some of those hand-drawn pictures. Oh no, my poor innocent childhood brain. My parents got divorced when my dad was caught cheating on my mom. After the divorce I went to visit my dad in LA when I was about 13. I decided to snoop through his bin of floppy disks and found a very long story he had typed out during the divorce. In it he describes graphic sexual acts with the new woman. How his life would be easier if my mom was to suddenly drop dead. Specifically that he would fantasize about the police showing up at his door to tell him my mom was killed in a car accident. I also learned how his AOL name that he'd been using for years is actually just an inside joke between him and his now wife about the length of his D. He still uses that name to this day. He did find out that I saw it and he explained that at the time of the divorce he was seeing a therapist who told him to write the story. I think it was meant for the therapist to read and gain some insight into what my dad was going through. When I was in middle school, my dad had a box at the top of his bedroom closet filled with hardcore porn on VHS. Later, when my folks weren't home, I watched a bunch of it with my friends. It made me very popular. No regrets. I found typed letters from my dad to my mom in my mom's room. They had been divorced for a couple years at that time and the letters said some pretty horrible things about her and about how we were being raised. I'm assuming she was keeping them in case she needed them in court. When I was a kid there were no such thing as cell phones and we didn't have magazines, so going to the bathroom was pretty boring. One way I used to entertain myself was by playing with a round piece of rubber that sat in the medicine cabinet. I would poke it, stretch it, spin it on my finger. Wasn't until several years later during sex ed that it suddenly dawned on me that I had been playing with my mother's diaphragm that whole time. I spent a lot of time in closets as a child. My favorite place to be, in the back of our cedar closet. I found the Santa suit, wig and beard. Childhood ended. Not NSFW. But damn. My mother left her diary open once. It was a few years after my father died, and I read just the one entry on the open page. She was sad that I had been having dreams of him comforting me, and wrote that she hadn't dreamed of him once. It made me feel guilty for years. I never told her. My therapist said it was deliberate. Me and my brother found a stack of about 50 Playboys in my dad's closet when I was 13. It was awesome for about a year till he discovered we had been messing with them and got rid of them. Then we were all out of porn again, but it was a very educational year. When I was little I always liked going in my parents' closet. Their closet is above the garage so it is massive. There aren't any windows so I liked going there during the day to be in the dark. They kept a lot of random stuff in the very back so I always thought it was fun to go through. It wasn't until it got around Christmas time when my parents said I was not allowed to go in their closet anymore, which naturally made me want to go in there even more. I waited until they were distracted with something and went in. I went to the very back where I like to explore and found a bunch of wrapped Christmas presents. A few weeks later I got those same presents but from Santa. This really confused me as an 8-year-old. Why would Santa bring the gifts early just to have to come back later to out them out on Christmas Eve? I guess it must make it easier and definitely would make the sleigh lighter. Heroin needle. Crack pipe. I was 5 or 6. After my mother passed, I was organizing her effects and I found a sex toy and I'm pretty sure I found some nudes. Remember in Ghostbusters when Winston Zeddemore was like, "I've seen it, that would turn you white." I was very Caucasian that day. Oh my god. Yes, I was 8. Wasn't really snooping through my parents' stuff, but our family photo albums, particularly with mine and my siblings as babies. First, I got to my brother's. It was so colorful and bright and filled with notes written by my mom. Same with my little sisters. Then I got to mine. It was boring to say the least. Just plain pictures with no notes or stickers or whatsoever. Then I got to the last page. I remember the exact verbatim of what I read in this small piece of blue sticky paper written by my mom. Is there any more I can say? No. Because we really wanted a baby girl. 8-year-old boy bawled that day. I ended up finding a quite kinky vibrator dildo in my grandma's possession. That was 6 years ago, but I still have the image seared into my mind. I found hentai in my mom's room when I was 13, and I watched it out of curiosity. I was like, why does this cartoon look like it might be a porn? Anyway, I found out I like hentai, but I don't really like knowing that my mom gets off to the same flavor of stuff as me. Sometimes that still pops up in my brain and I got to forcefully repress. My mom never found out I watched her VHS hentai. I think it was called Adventure Kid, something like that. I think I was actually in there looking for makeup. She wouldn't let me buy makeup, so I used to steal hers. I found a beer opener that was shaped like a huge black D. I put it back, but then years later my younger sister found it and asked them what it was. Their faces were red while I tried not to laugh. I was fixing my father's computer as a teenager. It was filled with a ton of spyware and viruses. I decided to go through his massive folder of porn to find out what sites he was visiting that was giving him so many problems. The early 2000s were a dangerous time. In there, I found a bunch of nudes and pictures of an old woman, at least in her 60s, engaged in various sex acts with my father. I wondered who it was, so I went into his email account with the password I made for him and found out he met a woman on Adult Friend Finder and was living with her when he was supposed to be traveling for work. I also found out that he had a gun, which is scary since my father was abusive towards me for most of my life. I told my mom because my mom is awesome AF and deserves to know. She was happy because she hated him and couldn't leave him because she would be ducked financially. He found out when my mom told him to get out of the house and go back to ducking his grandma. Till everyone has freaky ass parents. I'm glad I wasn't nosy enough to snoop till after my parents broke up. All I ever found was my dad's pot. Thank all gods. My mom was passed out drunk. Her boyfriend at the time told me to go get the keys from under her pillow. There were no keys, but there was a large vibrator. I was about 12. Those situations change you. Yeah, no? Edit. The vibrator was as long as my forearm. I found my paranoid schizophrenic father's diary full of rants, including him accusing my mother of adultery and her denials. It was just so sad and messed up. A really awful peek inside his mind. I knew he was sick, but to get that honest a look inside was far too much for a 10-year-old. I admitted to my mother what I found. When I went back to look at the notebook another time, I saw she'd ripped out all the pages. We'd run away from him years before. I have no idea why she kept the thing. A little late, but I hope someone sees this so they can share my horror. I was laying on the bed with my parents when I saw what I thought was strawberry squeeze candy. They tried to hide it and make me forget about it, but I thought they were just hiding some sweet candy from me and not sharing. So it made me want to try it more. I used my finger to try a little bit from the top and my parents were laughing and I didn't understand why. Took me a couple years to realize. I ate my parents' duck-ing lube straight from the applicator and it makes me die inside every time I remember. Duck my life. Edit. I was maybe 7 or 8 at the time for reference. At my mom's, a nudie of her. Lots of sex toys. I was seriously impressed and scarred. At my dad's, a huge amount of nudie mags. Defs helped me realize I liked ladies and dudes. A book called The Magic of Sex. And 2 vibrators. The only thing I really regret finding is the nudie pic of my mom. Doubt it will never not be burned into my head. She looked happy though, so Neosus copyright airing. Yeah, I honestly wish I never looked. I found the foreclosure papers my mom was served. I immediately called my mom at work crying because we were being sued. She didn't want to tell me until it happened. Made it worse for her. Found my mom and stepfather sex drawer one day. Ducking horrifying. How is an under TV drawer the perfect place for VHS porn and dildos? Hideous. Went to get a pair of dress socks out of my mom's dresser. Found a hardcore BDSM porn mag. Put the socks back. Closed the drawer. Changed into an outfit that didn't need dress socks. I was definitely aware my parents were human people who had sex. But I was also 14 years old and just, wow. Whoa. Found my mom's Hitachi and played with the new microphone. Then I found out it vibrated and started massaging my face and neck. Duck. I found my mom's big purple dildo and touched it thinking it was something else. It wasn't my parents but a friend of mine's parents. His mom was a math teacher. She was short and round. We went over to his house and he said, I need to show you what I found. So hell yeah, we were in and wanted to see. He takes us to his parents' room and the closet has a padlock on it, but they mounted it with the screws exposed. So all you had to do to break in was take the screws out. He takes out the screws and opens the door and immediately goes to a big paper grocery sack. You know when you go get fast food and the fries are greasy and soak through the bag? It was like that, but was a full-sized grocery bag that had something in it that was obviously too long to lay flat on the bottom of the bag. You could see the shape of something pushing against the side of the bag about 3 or 4 inches from the bottom. Now I don't know why he grabbed it barehanded, but he opens the bag and pulls out a hand-carved dildo that was the length and diameter of my forearm. It looked like a short baseball bat with a massive sewing machine motor on it for the vibration. It was coated in what looked like really thick lube, like Crisco consistency. This lady was my 7th and 8th grade math teacher. I could never look at her the same way again. I found a CD in their room that was just white. There wasn't any writing on it or anything. Being the stupid child that I was, I went to put it in our family DVD player anyways. I realize now that what I had watched for a few seconds was actually a porn video. Parents walked in and yelled at me and my sister. I asked what the people were doing on TV. My parents replied with, wrestling, and shut it off. My mom used to make dolls out of used pantyhose. It was a thing in the 80s. A creepy thing. But it happened. Think Cabbage Patch Preemies but out of pantyhose. I found one in her closet in a box. I found one in her closet once. It was a man. With a fake fur beard. And an enormous DCK. Like enormous. I'd never seen one in real life. So it caused me much anxiety. Also realizing mom was making naked man dolls. For what reason? Why? Mom, why? Found a Japanese porn mag in his closet when he came home from Japan. Kinda awful figuring out that your dad has the same fetish as yourself. Some good it in there though NGL. Found all my parents' sex toys by accident one day. Not exactly Snoop. I was eating breakfast when right on the table was their vibrating cock ring. I wasn't hungry anymore. My mom used my husband's phone to call the man she was having an affair with. The phone had auto record on, and that was how I found out she'd been in that relationship for 17 years and tried to have kids with him as well. My dad found out about this years ago and almost broke the marriage. What he doesn't know is that she continued the relationship up until last year and only recently broke it off because the bastard cheated on her with someone else. She's also a raging narcissist.